I'm Hannah Johnson, and I have the great pleasure to be talking to Peter Warwick, who is the CEO of Scholastic. We're really glad he could join us today, and we are going to kick off our discussion on children's book publishing with someone who has a world view on it and quite an influential one as well. So thank you, Peter, for joining us here.
It's a pleasure.
Let's start with the big picture. Are there maybe 2 or 3 kind of top-level things that you're thinking about when you're looking at Scholastic's strategy over the coming sort of near to medium future? Are there things in the environment that are influencing your decision-making?
Well, thank you. I've got a terrible cold, so if I sort of croak and cough and sneeze, that's why.
We'll forgive you.
I think the big thing which is really driving our strategy is the literacy crisis, which exists in so many parts of the world, particularly obviously in the United States, which is our largest market, but also in many other countries as well. And I think that because Scholastic is so much associated with literacy and reading, and that we're facing a situation where clearly more funding, more attention, more activities around literacy need to happen, then those are things that we particularly want to connect to. And I think that why that's important is clearly because you have to learn to read in order to read to learn, as they say. And so just from the point of view of any individual reaching their full potential, then literacy really matters. I think literacy also matters because you can't really play a full part as an individual in society unless you can read and read well. And also, it's also been shown that those kids who read well and read often and enjoy reading have fewer mental health problems than those who are infrequent readers or find difficulties reading. Mm-hmm. And I think that, especially after COVID, the whole area of mental health amongst, well, maybe all of us, but particularly children is something that really matters. And I think that if the key things around literacy being, the thing that guides you going forward are that, first of all, you have to make the books engage. You have to really focus on making books engaging, because that's really key to getting kids interested and improving their literacy skills and so on. I think you also have to find new sources of funding, because there's a lot of money from unconventional sources going into resources for kids and for reading, and particularly those who are from underprivileged or underrepresented communities. And I think also you have to think about technology, because technology, clearly blended learning, a mixture of both digital and sort of analog tools, is something which is really important in schools in terms of learning to read as well. So we're really focusing on that at the moment.
It's interesting that you say literacy is it problematic in the United States? It's something where we think we have a super high literacy rate, everything is, but clearly there's an issue, or that you see an issue here.
No, there's definitely an issue, because it's something like only around, only around half kids in schools are at the required level for their grade. And if you then look at minority communities, Black, Asian, Indigenous, and so on, it's even lower. And it's been a real issue. It was declining before COVID. I think almost throughout the world, the literacy rates have declined during COVID because there was a sort of a disruption to the normal systems of teaching and learning. And there's a lot of resources now being devoted to trying to alleviate that situation.
And so are there specific things that Scholastic is doing? You said making books engaging, but that's that seems like that's one element of this larger problem.
Well, I think that there are some specific things which we are doing. I mentioned that funding. There are a broader array of funding sources available for books to enable kids who are behind in their reading to be able to get more reading material and to be able to get more reading material that they can use at home with their families. So, whereas education funding might at one stage have been primarily done through sort of federal and state, through the education system, through the departments of education in the US in particular. But now there are other initiatives which are being done in order to get books on a regular basis to home, because it's felt that that's really a key thing to do. And it's somewhere where we, as Scholastic, we can really help with that, because we're the largest publisher, and because we also publish school market editions of many of the other publishers' books as well. We can work with those, either states or with private philanthropists or with other private sector foundations to be able to get more books into the hands of kids at home. And that's really a key initiative that's going on. At a time when there's a lot of, as you know, in the United States in particular, there's a great deal of fuss around what books should kids be reading, book banning and all that kind of thing. But there's one thing that everybody's agreed on, and it's sort of the lever that I try to use, which is that we need to tackle literacy and low levels of literacy. And that's something, it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, that's something that you can agree on, and it's something that's important. And so that's a key thing for us to be able to do. So we've, for example, one of my colleagues has taken on a role as Chief Impact Officer to be able to actually work full-time in finding and working with new sources of funding, whereby we can get books particularly into the hands of kids from underrepresented and unprivileged communities, and particularly get books home. Because there's clearly a relationship between the number of books that you have at home and your likely ability to read well.
And are these projects mainly based in the U.S., or do you also have international projects where you're donating books or working with people outside?
Well, there's a scheme. It's mainly in the U.S., but I know there's a scheme in New Zealand, for example, which is quite similar, which is the government through the Department of Education in New Zealand does actually, working with us, provides a certain number of books per home to kids, and I think it's something that gradually I think people will see that this is a really key initiative, that getting books directly into homes is pretty important. Mm-hmm. And it's done as well through our sort of book clubs and book fairs and things that we do in the US and in Canada and the UK and Australia and New Zealand as well. But it's really key. It's really driving how we feel about our business. We like to feel that as a business we have a strong mission, which is to publish books for all children, so that all children have an opportunity to read. And really it's tapping into that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it sounds like this is such a big initiative for you, and I would assume also that this is part of your corporate philanthropy outreach. I mean, we've seen this year sales kind of correcting back to pre-pandemic levels. So I would assume that you're also looking at new business opportunities coming up. Are there any areas where you see growth potential for your business, or where you're looking at to find revenue?
Yeah, well, if you're just specifically thinking about the book trade, and in most developed countries, certainly, I think we're doing a lot of work in terms of focusing on new formats and making sure that we're being innovative in that. Graphics novels is something that we were associated with right right from the beginning. And it's clearly an expanding area for kids. I mean, we do a survey of children and reading. And so, for example, in 2018, we asked kids about, what sort of books do you favour? What do you like? What's top of your list? And I think it was 22% of kids said that they favoured graphic novels. Wow. We did the same survey very recently, and that number went from 22 to 37%.
Wow.
So, if there's anybody here who's thinking about, well, what should we really be focusing on in, where I live in my country and all the rest of it, I think you have to say that graphics novels is one of the key areas to focus on. The other thing that you can do as well is to take existing series that you have, and remember, from a publishing point of view, if you can get a kids' series going, it's the best thing ever, right? I mean, because you've got to have that series approach, if you can. You can actually convert, more conventional chapter books into graphics novels. Mm-hmm. We did it with, Babysitter's Club or with, whatever it happens to be. And it's just a way of expanding the market. The thing about children's publishing is you've got a constant revolving cycle of customers, right? And so you can reinvent those things for the sort of for the market and the circumstances at the time. We're also looking at other innovative things that we're doing. We're next year, for example, we'll publish our first manga, as it were, graphics, which a series of books from Japan. About a unicorn, Unico Awakening, and that's really designed for a middle grade audience. And later this afternoon, David Saylor, who's actually the publisher of that, is going to be on the panel here, and you can ask him about manga and its opportunities, because manga is one of the fastest growing book formats in the world. But people have consistently had trouble of trying to find manga that's suitable for children. Because manga are a little like, not always exactly what you might want for younger children. And so the idea is that this series in particular, and other ones that I know David's in the process of discussing to sign up from Japan and release here, that's important too, I think. And we've also done things like, for our next zombie season, we're partnering with Roblox, for example, so that you get different platforms so that you can... The whole idea, I think, if we're trying to really grow in a time when sales through the trade have been declining, from all-time highs, it has to be said, declining.
Of course, yeah.
But down, is to just try to be as innovative as possible. I think that's what we have to go for.
Well, it also sounds like you're talking a little bit about brand building. I'm super glad you mentioned the Babysitter's Club, because I think I read every single one of those when I was a kid.
Good.
But I mean, it's now a brand, or you're like Goosebumps. I mean, these kinds of things it sounds like you can build on and work with in different formats. I mean, that's sort of. Well, also part of Scholastic's DNA, sort of, these brands.
And one of the things that we're actually just about to benefit from it in the next few weeks, but is if you get this cycle whereby if you have a book and then it's adapted for TV, for streaming, for a film, even if you don't actually own those rights, I mean, in some cases we do own the rights, but for a lot of them we don't. Mm-hmm. There's a virtuous circle there of book, screen, book, right? And you can see that in what's going to happen with our business, I think, at least I hope, anyway, over the next few weeks, is that, first of all, last Friday, Friday the 13th, there was a live-action version of Goosebumps.
Exciting.
Right?
I love that.
And it was launched on Disney Plus and Hulu. And it had, over the weekend, 4.2 million viewings.
Wow.
Right? It's been the most successful sort of Disney TV launch weekend for 3 years. Well, that should drive interest amongst kids, even younger kids, because in the actual film, the kids have been made a bit older they are in the
Yeah.
in the animated book and animated versions in the past. And then the other thing that's happening is we published the Hunger Games, and there's a Lionsgate film of the prequel of that, which is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is being released next month in November. And even with just the the trailers and everything, Hunger Games have been, various Hunger Games have gone to #1 in the kids. We released a new, not surprisingly, a new paperback edition of Songbirds and Snakes. But so you can get a very much a virtuous circle. And I think if you've got stuff that is appealing enough to appeal to filmmakers, TV makers, and all the rest of it, then it's a really good way of driving revenues.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I can't wait to watch the Goosebumps thing too. I think
it looks pretty good. I haven't watched. I've watched the trailer. I haven't watched the actual thing because I was traveling. But
well, we're almost out of time. But I do want to ask you one more question, and that's about AI, because this is, it's sort of a hot topic, and I'm just wondering. A lot of people are still working out how they want to use it or what they want to do with it. Does Scholastic have? Are you playing with it? Do you have any points of view, or you are more in a wait and see mode at this point?
Well, I think when you think about AI, it's worthwhile dividing it into two sort of categories, because AI can be used in a really unequivocally helpful way, I think, to help drive your marketing, customer service, operations. It applies really to every industry. Mm-hmm. And we're obviously very interested in that because that's something where it can really help us. Mm-hmm. Where it gets complicated, obviously, is in the whole relationship between generative AI and creativity.
Yeah.
And that's the area. We have an internal working group working on it. Our board of directors are always wanting to talk about it. So that's another thing. But otherwise, we're really working with... we don't have a specific point of view, except that there are clearly some issues around contracting. There's issues around being able to use copyright material for generative AI models. And we're already talking, authors and agents want to talk about it and what it means. So we're just trying to keep up with everybody else in terms of that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what we're talking about next year in Frankfurt in terms of AI. I'm afraid we have to leave it there and give up the stage for the next panel. Yeah. But Peter, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time and your insights. So thank you.